Sorry, ma'am, for delayed by 5-10 minutes.
No issues, Megha. We'll get started.
Yeah, just ma'am. So, students, we have with us Mr. Sattigeri is the scientist H and head of CSIR Traditional Knowledge Digital Library Unit since October 2018, and she carries over 25 years of R&D experience across both private and government sectors, with keen interest in integrating research by drawing synergy between traditional knowledge and modern sciences, especially health and wellness. At the CSIR unit, she has been working towards delivering to its mandate. TKDL, that is Traditional Knowledge Digital Library, as a tool for defensive protection of Indian traditional knowledge, currently pertaining to the Indian system of medicine, Ayurveda, Unani, Siddha Yoga, and Suba Rigpa. In addition, she has initiated steps for expanding the scope of TKDL, enlarging information content in the database from traditional agriculture practices, geographical indications, undocumented indigenous knowledge, besides other aspects of traditional system of medicine, such as diagnostic tools, practices, dietary interventions, surgical tools, and methods, etc. I welcome you, ma'am, and it's actually an honor for me to invite you for this talk, and we are really grateful for you for your time. Over to you, ma'am. You can start your session.
Thank you, Megha. At the outset, let me thank Professor Anil Gupta, the founder of National Innovation Foundation and the Honeybee Network, for giving me this opportunity. Megha, thank you for the invite. It's my pleasure to, talk to all the students of the BIIS Ignition School with what little I know on this particular topic. Are you able to see my screen now?
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Okay. So what I'd be talking today is on the IPR patent ethical framework for accessing and exploring people's knowledge and grassroots innovation. So what I have done is that I have outlined the presentation as a general introduction, a very brief introduction. We'll go into the basics of what is invention and innovation, protection of innovation, and then go to the ethical framework. And I believe this particular topic is of very high importance and significance to all the students who have joined us today in this particular session, because much of you would be involved in validating or documenting grassroots innovations. And that's been one of the prime interests of Professor Gupta and the Honeybee Network. And I will also tell briefly about the importance of these grassroots innovations. So let me get started. If there are any questions, you can interrupt me in between and we will pick up the questions then. Or if in case you prefer having it at the end of my talk, even that is all right with me. So let's get started. I'll go to the very basics of, what is traditional knowledge, what is traditional cultural expressions, because this has relevance to the grassroots innovations. So when I talk of traditional knowledge, let's go by, whatever is a broad definition that is being circulated across. That is on the traditional knowledge. It is the knowledge, know-how, skills, and practices that are developed, sustained, and passed on from generation to generation within a community. It could be a part of one's culture or a spiritual identity. So, constituent of something that has an agricultural domain, scientific technology, ecology, and something related to the biodiversity. Whereas when you're talking of the cultural expression, the traditional cultural expression, it is also known as the expression of folklore. So what does it mean? It talks about both tangible and intangible forms of traditional knowledge, like something like oral traditions or expressions. It can be even a language as a vehicle. It is a performing arts. It is a social practice. It's a ritual. It is a knowledge and practices that concerns ecology, nature, and the universe. It can also include traditional craftsmanship. And this is important when we are talking in the context of grassroots innovations. While these are all the broad terminologies or definitions that have been used to define traditional knowledge and traditional cultural expression, you'd be very surprised to know that even at an international level, there's no accepted definition of what is a traditional knowledge and what is a traditional cultural expression. But we'll go ahead with what is known as of today. When we are talking of the traditional, tribal knowledge or cultural expression of folklore or folk knowledge, it can be very broad, When we are talking of science and technology, it could be treatments, it could be medicines, it could be dairy products, it could be agriculture, methods of agriculture, practices of agriculture, it could include tools of agriculture, it could include metallurgy and anything to deal with the artisans and tool making and many more. And if we are talking of the soft forms of the cultural expressions, it could be dances, it could be music, it could be theater, it could be gestures. So you are dealing with, a very broad area of an expression, be it in terms of science and technology, or it could be a part of one's. So I'll change gears here because I've given a brief of what traditional knowledge is, what traditional cultural expression comprises of, and let's move on to what is in modern day definitions, what is invention and innovation. So let's again start with the very basic. When you're talking of science, because this is largely a BIRAC program, let's stick to science and technology. So when you're talking of science, it is a systematic attempt to understand and interpret the world. So it can be any broad area. It could be life sciences, it could be mathematical sciences, and many more. And here, again, by the modern terminology, what is required is skills of literacy and numeracy. Whereas when you're talking of technology, it is a systematic study of techniques for making and doing things. It could involve fabrication, it could make use of artifacts. And here, skills of literacy is not important. If you take an artisan, okay, a blacksmith, he may not be educated, but you would see most wonderful things coming out of his hands. So that is what is technology. And when we are talking of, what is invention, and here we are saying anything creating something new that did not exist before is a invention. New solutions to existing problems is again an invention. And invention is typically a result of one's creativity and curiosity. So when we are talking of invention, very often you see that invention and innovation are loosely used by the public. But if in case you go by a scientific definition, innovation is invention and commercialization. So it has a broader angle. Innovation has a broader angle to it. So what is innovation? It is the process of bringing an invention to the market and or the end users. So it is a planned activity. It does not happen by chance. So one has to put efforts into making an innovation compared to an invention because it can be a very spontaneous creation of one's human's creativity. Well, we are talking of innovation. As I said, it is something that has, reached a commercial purpose. It has gone to the market or the end user. Typically, if we are looking at it, you might have heard, incremental innovation or disruptive or radical innovation. Typically, again, among the business folks, what is used is incremental innovation, which is a value to a customer with a small increase, It could include design, it could include features, it could also include a small use. Whereas a disruptive innovation is something where you're applying a new technology or a new process to a current market. Now let us go to a more, a complex term of what is a radical innovation. A radical innovation is something that, is developed based on a revolutionary technology. And certain examples are something like biotechnology for pharmaceutical companies. It's not easy to make a biological product. You have to go through a whole lot of both lab experimentation as well as clinical trials before it actually hits the market. If you talk of jet engines, fiber optic cable, these are all some radical innovations that have been brought into the market. What is a very important and part of innovation is what is called the architectural innovation. This is very important in today's context because you are applying lessons learned, skills learned, and the technology in a different market. in very loose terms, one can say that this is something where you are repurposing an existing technology for a newer market. And today, in the context of COVID, you would have heard, very often a molecule which is known for a particular indication is being repurposed for COVID-19. So this is more of an architectural innovation where you are actually applying the technology for a different market. And combines both technological as well as business model disruptions. So these are again, very broad types of innovation. But I would say that you have also might have heard of innovations called the jugaad, a quick fix solution. You would have also heard of something called frugal innovation, which is a low cost product that is being brought to address the needs of the people either in the low income class or the middle income class. Nano is an example of frugal innovation. And of course, you have the grassroots innovations, which I'll come to next. When you are talking of innovation in a very broad term, you have product innovations, you have process innovations, and you have also organization based innovations. So all this again fall under the broad umbrella of innovation. So let's go to the topic at hand. What is the grassroots and innovation? And by our own Professor Anil Gupta, he has defined grassroots innovations as that which is developed by common people having no professional degree or diploma. It is self-employed. It is, innovation from the informal sector, and it is driven by unmet social needs. Please take it. The emphasis is on driven by unmet social needs. That's grassroots innovations. And it is tried by people without any outside help. It may address one's own needs as well as that of a third party, and addresses larger regional or national unmet need. Again, because driven by the empathy for the disadvantaged people. And there might be a horizontal adoption of such technology passing on from one person to the other across regions in the country or otherwise as well. Whereas when you're talking of innovations for grassroots, it is by individuals or organizations for improving the socio-economic conditions of the communities and or individuals at grassroots. And as I mentioned, frugal innovation could be a part of innovations for the grassroots. And it is particularly developed in villages or urban areas. And again, it addresses either disadvantaged communities or areas. There's a third part of it, which is called the innovations at grassroots. And this is jointly by the NGOs, formal sector, or individuals at the informal sector, or unattached professionals, companies that are targeting innovations, at the grassroots. And it is for the grassroots. And what is very important when I talk of all this is that most of these that I have talked, the jugaad, the grassroots, and the frugal innovations may become subsets of each other. They are largely inclusive in nature, and they grassroots particularly also talk about sustainability, when it comes to either bioresources or the ecology around. And why are grassroots innovation important? Because it is, the people involved, and I would bring to your attention the book that Professor Gupta has brought out. It talks about grassroots innovation, minds on the margin or not marginal minds. I think that's self-explanatory, and you would truly appreciate that people who come from the disadvantaged areas are not to be left behind where one considers innovation. And this has been aptly mentioned by the GM for Strategic Partnerships of the Technology Innovation Agency, Patrick, who says innovation and invention are not the exclusive rights of the haves and the educated people. So it is very important to consider grassroots and grassroots innovations as well. So what are the examples of grassroots innovations? It could be, I've just given chosen examples from across, various countries, particularly from our own honeybee network group, where, a person with no educational background, just because he had seen the plight of his mother weaving Uchampalli saris, he's made a machine for it. And that's an example of a grassroots innovation. Typically, the farmers, again, based on their own needs, would have developed a certain mechanical instrumentation. And that again forms grassroots innovations. And here's an example of the cotton stripper machine, There is another example again made by a farmer, which is extremely good, and it has been selling in crores of rupees across the whole world. In fact, his particular technology of fruit and vegetable processing machine has reached countries, across Africa as well. This is not just related to only machine making and the instrumentation. Grassroots innovations can also cover innovations from the local healers. As I had mentioned in my very beginning of my talk, I said cultural expression can include even folk treatments and folk medicines. And here is an example of a drug called the herbavate, again made by the National Innovation Foundation and Honeybee Network. It is a herbal formulation from local health healers, okay, and it is for skin disorders. There's been certain validation done by the Honeybee Network and the National Innovation Foundation, and the drug has been, released in the market. This is not limited to only India. There are countries, including China, that have paid a lot of emphasis on grassroots and innovations from the grassroots. And an example I have just quoted is about the briquette stove from China, which is selling in millions of copies across the world and in China as well. And they have also made coals, which are much more efficient in terms of the carbon release. And here from a Kenya, you can see grassroots can not, just involve something, fancy or something, which would look very beautiful to the eyes. It can include even something as simple as, having sacks, and people growing spinach, kale, and other vegetables in those sacks. And this is from a club in Nairobi. This is a grassroots innovation yet again. And this particular thing has helped to meet not only the needs of, the health of the local people, nutrition of the local people, it has also helped to provide a livelihood for these grassroots innovators who have been able to sell their produce in the market. And this particular money, as I believe the story goes, is that they have used this money to educate their own children. So it can say, you can very well connect that, most of the grassroots innovation are connected to the livelihoods of the people involved. Okay. There's another example that I have mentioned about a pedal-based, instrumentation for drinking water. So these are, very simple technologies used for addressing an unmet need, especially of the disadvantaged community, which, is of low cost and also talks about the sustainability. And why is this important, grassroots innovations? I'll tell you, moving gears again, the importance of traditional knowledge, grassroots innovations, are kind of interlinked. And I will draw your attention to, something that happened in the mid 90s. I'm sure that many of you might not even be aware, considering that you might have been just small children at in these times. And in the mid 90s, what had happened is that, patents were filed across the world, especially in the US and Europe, on what we had called as our Indian traditional knowledge. And examples include turmeric for wound healing by a US university. And this patent was filed in 1993 and it was granted in 1995. And this took us by shock because turmeric is something that we use on a regular basis in all our homes across India, not just in India, even across South Asia. There was a patent filed on basmati rice lines and grains, again, it was filed in 94 and it was granted in 97 by the USPTO, and this is by a company. And the neem, which we use as a fungicide, or an antimicrobial in many of our day-to-day activities, was filed by again a company and as well as by the Department of Agriculture in 91, and the patent was granted in 94. What does it actually all mean? Okay, if somebody files a patent, what has it got to do with us? It basically, what a patent does is it offers an ownership to the person who has been granted that particular patent. And what happens because of that is that the others, the rest of us would have to seek permission of that applicant to exercise that invention. So it means here in this case, if we have to use neem for wound healing, we had to go seek the permission of the University of Mississippi to exercise that invention at our homes. So this we found is a little, way too much, considering that this has all been a part of our traditional knowledge and it has been here for thousands of years. So what does actually it mean, for a person who is, trying to groom in science and technology, especially in the modern times? You might have all heard the word prior art. Okay, prior art means that everything that is made available to the public anywhere in the world by means of disclosure, including drawings and other illustrations, and it should be considered sorry prior art, provided that such making has been made available prior to the relevant date of the patent filing. So basically, in very simple terms, what prior art means is any information that has been made public, okay, prior to somebody filing a patent. Say, when I'm talking of turmeric, okay, I go to the literature and see that somebody else has used turmeric for wound healing. That means it is a prior art. It is not something novel and inventive for me to get a patent. But in this case, I'll tell you what happened and why there was a difference. And but the conundrum of such a thing is that prior art is basically assessed by somebody sitting in the patent office called the patent examiner, and it also depends on what he considers as information known, because sometimes it may not be very obvious. As I had mentioned in the case of turmeric, it can be something more complicated. It could be hidden somewhere in literature or in a patent another patent application. So where there is always a duality in terms of identifying whether it is actual prior art or it is not a prior art. So it then depends on the patent attorney who is fighting the patent. So it is a very complicated matter, but we will keep it simple for now. We will say that any published information is prior art. So here, what CSIR and the government of India had done is, it fought a very long battle between, anyway between 3 to 11 years to get these patents on turmeric, basmati, and neem revoked or amended. And that is because we had ample information in our own traditional literature that these particular items, that is turmeric, basmati, or neem, have been known for those intended applications as in the patents filed or granted. So basically what it points out is that if in case we are not careful, and especially where we are, allowing somebody to misuse our not traditional knowledge or our knowledge, okay, it causes what is called as a misappropriation of the knowledge. And here misappropriation basically says that somebody is seeking an exclusive IP ownership of an indigenous knowledge of nature originating from indigenous people. Here in the case of our own India, let's call it traditional knowledge, and it is all meant for a purpose. Somebody is claiming ownership of something that is already known for thousands of years as our tradition and culture, and that is what is misappropriation. So when misappropriation occurs with bioresources, it is also called the biopiracy. So one needs to be extremely careful, and it is therefore important to see what had gone wrong in our cases where we are talking of traditional knowledge. See, as I mentioned, prior art. Prior art is something that is already known in the public, okay, as information pertaining to a particular invention that has been filed by someone in the patent office. So when you look at this slide, you would see that there are so many books, of Indian traditional knowledge. And yet again, why were these patents granted in those, international offices? Typically, what happens is in any patent search office, there is something called the PCT minimum documentation. So people who are aware of having done research, amongst the students who are joined today, you will know that you have to do a literature search before you go into doing the research. Okay. So typically here also the patent examiner, he refers to something called the literature. Okay. It could be both patent literature as well as not patent literature. That is this information literature, when I say, is information that is already known to the public. Okay, it could be at a cost or it could be free of cost, but it is something that is already known to the public and available to the public. And this, once the PCT minimum documentation, is searched by the patent examiner, and if he finds a relevant information already known in the literature, then he says this invention is already known, we cannot grant you a patent. But in the case of our own traditional literature, what had happened is that, this information is in our regional languages, okay? And much of this is, even if translated, is not a part of the PCT minimum documentation. And that disconnect actually led to the patents being granted on turmeric, basmati meat, and many more such things, And because of that, we had to, bring in a particular tool, to ensure that, our information is documented properly and is also made accessible to the patent offices so that wrong patents are not granted on our traditional knowledge. And why I emphasize this is that when you're talking of grassroots innovations, you would very well connect that, the grassroots knowledge is known to only the local people, and much of it is translated from word of mouth, and it is passed across generations. And today, where we stand, many of these people are very old people who have this knowledge, and the next generations do not have any interest in this particular art or knowledge or practice, and this particular knowledge is on the verge of being lost forever. And that is what, very aptly said by this African proverb: when an old man dies, a library burns to the ground. So all this points to the very, 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 very important point that the documentation is very important. In tomorrow's assignment, I think with Professor Gupta, he will emphasize this further, why documentation is important. Let's go back again to, understanding the basics of documentation. Documentation is defined by the WIPO as accumulation, classification, and dissemination of information, the material as collected. Okay. The documentation of traditional knowledge and traditional cultural expressions may include recording them, writing them, taking pictures of it, recording videos of it, and it is typically done in a way which is different from the way it has been passing on, between communities of the indigenous population or the local folks. And this documentation is extremely important, as the basis of what I had said. One is to protect and preserve our own knowledge. And the second point is to make sure that somebody else does not misappropriate this knowledge for their own personal gains. So when I have talked about, what is the definitions, basics of it, and I have also told you what innovation and inventions are. Okay, so now let us move on to understand what are the methods that are available, or the structural frameworks that are available, the legal provisions that are available for protecting our inventions and innovation. Typically, what is done or understood by this is that, when we are talking of protection of any of our inventions or innovations or even our traditional knowledge, the intellectual property or the intellectual property rights is what comes to the forefront. And again, let's go to the definitions. Intellectual property refers to creations of the mind, such as inventions. It could also be literary or artistic works. It could be designs. It could be symbols. And it would be also names and images used in commerce. That is typically the trademarks that you might have heard of. Okay. And whereas the intellectual property rights is actually a legal provision that refers to the assignment of property rights through patents, copyrights, and trademarks, and many more. Typically, there are two ways of protecting one's invention. When you are talking of something with a of industrial nature, it is the patents, the industrial designs, the trademarks, the trade secrets, integrated circuits, geographical indications, and plant varieties are the different ways by which one could protect the rights of the inventor, or even the local indigenous communities. When we are talking of copyright, it is largely the softer part. It could be the literary works, it could be poetry, it could be novels, it could be films, it could be music. It could also include softwares that are created even for the documenting of traditional knowledge. So traditional knowledge per se cannot be patented or copyrighted. But when you are creating a database of it, we are creating a software of it, that can be protected. The software can be protected as a copyright. So under the Patents Act of 1970 of India and further amendments to it, okay. And what is an invention? It means a new product or process involving an inventive step and is capable of industrial application. So an invention must be novel. It needs to include an inventive step and it needs to have an industrial applicability or utility. So these are the three major things that are required for somebody to file a patent so that the patent examiners look at it and then look at the prior art and then a patent is granted. Okay. So here let me talk about what is the inventive step and the criticality of it. Inventive step says a feature of an invention that involves technical advance as compared to existing knowledge or having economic significance or both and makes the invention not obvious to a person skilled in the art. Okay. So what is inventive step? Today, when I'm talking of, say, turmeric for wound healing, okay. So is that a novel, say somebody says, okay, I'm using it for gangrene. It is a very specific, wound. And this particular gangrene is not known in the traditional literature. So let me file a patent. Okay. So you may think it is novel. But, when you're coming to inventive step, okay, when we are talking of infection or wound healing, turmeric in literature is known for wound healing. Okay, so it is obvious. Say when I am a person who is exercising Ayurveda, I know that if in case I use it for a cut, okay, and prevent infection on the cut by using turmeric, I can also use it for gangrene. So to me, it is obvious. So that is what it says. Person skilled in the art. Okay, if it is obvious to a person skilled in the art, it is not an inventive step. Okay. But say, for example, turmeric and you're using XYZ, as added components to enhance the efficacy or effectiveness for wound healing, along with turmeric. Then in that case, depending on what is the result of it, say you're expecting 10 times or 15 times synergy, but by experimentation, you have found a 100 times efficacy, then in case it is not obvious, a person skilled in the art also could not have imagined that such a kind of a result could have resulted. Okay. And then it is, it falls under the criteria of inventive step. So now your patent application can be then assessed for the industrial applicability. And depending on what the patent examiners thinks of it and if in case there's an opposition, what the opposition comes back and you're able to respond positively, your patent can be granted. And this is extremely important when we are considering grassroots innovations because grassroots, for much of it, as I have mentioned about the herbovate, okay, this much have been passed on from communities, over ages, okay. As you see that, there is an evolutionary process, happening. There are improvisations that are happening at every generational level, okay. And says the new generation has created something which was not, typically that falls under the broad definition of cultural expression, then he or she reserves the right to protect their invention as a patent. So that becomes extremely important when you are considering folk knowledge, that is the traditional cultural expressions, to make sure that you have an inventive step and an industrial applicability. And very importantly, the invention should not fall under sections 3, 4, and 5. They have defined it in the Act. I will just mention about one important thing, that is the section 3P, which says traditional knowledge or any, be it a solo component or a mere aggregation of several components, it cannot be patented under the Indian Patent Act of 1970. So basically, it says that, I have, say, drug X for diabetes under the Ayurveda. I have three other drugs in Ayurveda, again known for diabetes. If I mix X along with Y, Z, and A, would it become a new formulation? Would it be something novel? Would it meet the inventive step? It typically by the Act, it is not, okay, unless you defend and you are able to prove that it is non-obvious to a person skilled in the art. You must be having some, extremely good results to say that it is not a mere mixing of, those components, but you are actually seeing an extremely good synergy among the components to give unexpected results. So then it falls under the technical viability for patenting and patent grant. So let me not repeat it. So basically, when you are granted a patent, it gives you ownership. So it can be bought, sold, or licensed or mortgaged to anybody else. It gives the territorial rights. What the territorial rights means? Say if you are filing a patent in India, you will be able to defend a patent only in India. Say somebody exercises an invention in US, okay, as long as they are not able to file a patent there, it is okay, but they can exercise the invention there. So what happens is that this all has a commercial angle to it. If you want to protect your invention across countries, you need to make sure that your patent filing happens in all those countries of interest, so that you are depriving somebody freedom to operate, so that they cannot exercise your invention in their country. The other way of protecting the grassroots innovations or even others is the geographical indications. The Geographical Indications of Goods Registration and Protection Act 1999 provides that a geographical indication can be registered. So it again gives rights to the local communities depending on the goods are of particular region and locality, and it is attributable to that particular geographical origin. For example, the rasgullas of West Bengal, the Nagpur oranges, the Tanjavur painting. So it need not be always related to bioresources. It can be otherwise also. Especially in Malaysia, what they do is that all the grassroots innovations are also protected as geographical indications, because the knowledge belongs to a particular community, okay, in a particular region of their country. So the entire community takes ownership of their, the knowledge, and they file the geographical indication, and such geographical indications are granted to those particular community. Whereas in India, a particular knowledge, even if it be the grassroots knowledge, it can be common across various regions in the country. So there's a lot more efforts that we need to put in to make sure that there's no duplication of such things, or even if such duplication occurs, it is not as part of the codified text. So, and then, we need to ensure that, the livelihoods of peoples or the people's rights for such grassroots innovations are protected. Where our Indian Patent Act does not allow one to patent plants. Okay, it does not fall under the purview of a patent. But however, we have a special framework called the Protection of Plant Varieties and Farmers' Rights Act, under which the new varieties can be registered. And anyway, between 6 to 15 years, a variety can be protected. And, it is an effective system for, plant varieties. It also provides for the rights of the farmers and plant breeders to even protect seeds, and this is to stimulate research and development, and as well as facilitation of the seed industry, so that high quality seeds and improved varieties are provided to the farmers for enhancing our agricultural productivity. In addition to the patent rights, including the geographical indication, what we have is a very, very important framework in the country to protect our bioresources, as well as the rights of the, the knowledge, the communities that have this indigenous knowledge. So what does the Biological Diversity Act 2002 aim at is, one is the conservation of the biological diversity, the sustainable use of such biological diversity, and the third and very important point is on the equitable sharing of benefits arising out of the use of biological resources, knowledge, and for matters connected therewith or incidental to that. So basically what it means is that if somebody is using bioresources of the forest dwellers, okay, so I say I have, commercial interest. I go to the forest dwellers and tell them, okay, I need, this particular plant, for so many kilograms. Okay. So they go about, identifying the plant. They come and give you the produce. Okay. So this is perhaps at a small fee for, providing the plant material. But you go back and you reap extra benefits from that particular plant material. So that is what is called the benefits that you have achieved. You have, access the information from the knowledge dwellers. Okay, you have access the bioresources from the knowledge dwellers, but you have used it for your own commercial purpose. So then, what happens? You have actually, gained so much that this particular act ensures that the benefits are also shared with the the beneficiaries, that is the farmers or the forest dwellers, so that there is a sustainability in their livelihoods as well. Okay, so that is one important part of the Biological Diversity Act. There is another very important part of the Biological Diversity Act or the National Biodiversity Authority. They go about, collecting what is known as the local knowledge, much of it you will get to hear from Professor Gupta more. This is the knowledge of the local communities. As I said, this local communities, the information is passed on from generations to generations. Very little has been actually documented, but the National Biodiversity Authority has been, assigned the responsibility of collecting this information across the country. And this is what is called the People's Biodiversity Register. So the documentation, as I said in my very beginning, documentation of such knowledge is important. But when you're talking of documentation, what are the other aspects that one needs to consider is two things. One is, you need to know, make sure that the communities know that you are collecting this information for a particular purpose. And when somebody has a commercial gain out of such knowledge, the benefits are also shared with that community from whom you have accessed the knowledge. So this is what the National Biodiversity Authority or the Biological Diversity Act provides for. And as I mentioned, the Honeybee Network and National Innovation Foundation have been key agencies who have been scouting and documenting innovations of the knowledge dwellers, okay, and the local communities, and as well as, what they call as the grassroots innovations, which are, recent improvisations of, it could be either traditional knowledge or otherwise to meet the needs of the local of their own needs or the other local communities. So in addition to all of it, there is something more that is there worldwide. I thought it's important for you to know, but this utility model is not available in our country in India. It is there in certain countries like Australia, Germany, China, and a few more other countries. And the utility model is a cheaper variety, I would say tool compared to the patent. And these countries where it is available follow a two-tier model of patenting. But the utility models, it looks for novelty, but it does not go in to look for inventive steps in most of the countries. Or even if low level of inventiveness is available, they are granted the utility models. It provides for a shorter duration of protection. Say, while patents give you 20 years of lifetime, this gives anywhere between 6 years to about 15 periods. And depending on the country, it can provide you multiple periods. Here in the case of Germany, they have given a 6 years protection, divided into 2 periods. And again, the fees are much lower compared to the patents. But what actually it does is it for all the grassroots innovations, which are relatively copying others' ideas. It could be even novel, but it tends to address a very limited applicability. Okay, whereas when you're talking of patent, it has a much wider applicability and a commercial angle to it. So it inculcates the need for a grassroots innovator to know and predict his innovation at the initial stages, while he is actually looking for further improvisation of his invention to meet larger commercial objectives. So we had talked about, the need for documentation, what is patent, what is invention, what is innovation, what is patent, what are intellectual property rights and all that. But over across all of this, what is extremely important is to build the ethical framework for, both documenting as well as accessing the information, as well as, making commercial gains out of it. So far, what we have seen is that, when we are actually, going into creating a prior art or protecting somebody else from, exercising known information, say, for example, as I had given you in the case of traditional knowledge of turmeric and all that, we are by giving our own prior art, we are only giving it a defensive protection. But what is positive protection? That is what is very important when we are considering grassroots. Okay, the positive protections is that it is creating, legal provisions within a governmental framework where the traditional knowledge that empowers the traditional communities is not given only for promoting their knowledge or preserving their knowledge, but it's also for promoting their own livelihoods. Okay, so it is extremely important that we think of a positive protection where their grassroots innovations are considered, or even traditional cultural expressions are considered. But of course, the sad part of it is that either nationally or internationally, there are most of the countries do not have legal provisions for protecting traditional knowledge or traditional cultural expressions, including local knowledge. And why is this important? Because, when, if I have to use, let me first read it out, you'll understand it extremely well. Tribes are tributes to modern day society, for they prove that sharing and caring collectively could bridge across independent hearts individually. So it tells, the importance of tribes in one's society. And if I have to now extrapolate the tribes to our, local communities, it need not be always a tribal community that holds such knowledge. It is very important that we actually protect our grassroots innovators because they provide for both sharing and caring collectively, and it is to address a larger goal of the local problems for sustainability of the. And why is this extremely important is that, I have mentioned it previously, most of the knowledge that resides today from, the oral traditional knowledge is with very old people. And much of the newer generations have not caught on this particular tradition of their older generations. And we are on the verge of losing such knowledge. And there have been very few, and in actually recent times it's been very encouraging that these local communities have been acknowledged and recognized for their inventions and innovations. But on a larger scale, there are a lot of issues when we are considering traditional knowledge, cultural expressions, and loosely put, even the grassroots innovations. For example, as I said, the very definition is still not there, and one doesn't know how the traditional knowledge or traditional cultural expression should be protected, who should benefit from such protection, because as I mentioned, the traditional knowledge may be within a particular community, but it may not be solely to a particular community. It may be spread across regions within the country or outside as well. So who should benefit from such protection? What is the objective for to be achieved by according intellectual property protection? What forms of behavior in relation to the protection should be considered acceptable or unacceptable? Should there be any exceptions or limits to the rights when you are protecting traditional knowledge or cultural expressions? How long should the protection be? To what extent do the current IPRs offer protection? And as I mentioned, in India, we do not allow for patenting traditional knowledge or traditional cultural expressions. So what sanctions should be there? What penalties should be there when somebody is breaching such rights of the people? What issues should be dealt both internationally and nationally? What kind of regulations should be brought in? And when we are talking of, this is all, within the nation. When we are talking of international, somebody from, another developed country wants to use our knowledge, what should be the foreign right holders, beneficiaries be treated? How should they be treated? How much information should be shared with them? a lot of questions, because there's still no framework yet in place. And, again, I bring to point, what Professor Gupta very fondly believes is, it is one for two, and it is for one to actually uh, look deeper into it. If traditional knowledge is public domain, then there is no reason for any exploiter of this knowledge within or outside the country to have obligation to compensate or reward the knowledge provider. But what happens in a grassroots innovation? Say for example, the herbivore that I had mentioned, it might have got improvised over generations. Okay, so then what happens with an improvised knowledge? Do we call it still traditional knowledge, or do we say that it is new knowledge? Something that can be assigned intellectual property rights. There's a lot of questions here. And if you look at this, contested domains, there's a if you look at the broad knowledge, there is a community knowledge, there is knowledge that is there in the public domain, and then there is an individual knowledge or innovation or practices. And of course, they have their common pockets, okay? And depending on whether it is an individual or a community, it all depends on, how we assign or look at these matters, and then make sure that either the individual rights or the community rights of the people are protected. And we need to identify frameworks how we can protect it. What the honeybee network does is that, depending on how the knowledge has been generated, okay, I will again, cite the example of what Professor Gupta says, in a particular example where there has been a plant that has been known, for properties that can treat typhoid. Okay, they had gone to the patent office and filed a patent, and while the patent was denied in India because of the prior art conditions, in US you did not have such provisions, so the patent was granted in the US. So the knowledge holders have been able to derive the benefits of such patent IPR protection as well as for the commercialization. So it is very important to see that, we consider the ethical, moral, and institutional issues of such matters and take a collective decision as to how we protect such knowledge. And very importantly, I think I'm running short of time. What is very important is from both, accessing the information from the knowledge holders, documenting such knowledge, and using it for further validation. The very first step is the free prior informed consent. What does free prior informed consent says is that free is that without any force, okay, without any compulsion, you are asking the knowledge holders to seek their consent, whether their knowledge, they are willing to share their knowledge with us, and to what extent they are willing to share their knowledge with us, and would they want us to further improvise or validate such information, and can we take it for a commercial benefit so that the benefits are again provided back to those communities. So this is the very, very first step to ensuring that the knowledge holders' rights are protected and the benefit sharing mechanism is also in place. So the National Innovation Foundation and Honeybee Network has, put together a very, very well-informed and nice prior informed consent form, where it actually talks about, when you are actually in conversation with the knowledge holder and you are, seeking their informed consent to accessing that knowledge. So it says, you are actually, can I share your contact details with those interested in the innovation or idea? Can we publish such information? To what extent do you want us to disclose the information for, whether it is partial disclosure or full disclosure? Under what conditions are you willing to disclose information? Only on commercial terms or free of cost, or if they want any other option, they will
Please mute yourself.
Yeah. So the prior informed, so there is an explanatory note, because informed is, you are informing the pros and cons of sharing that knowledge. The knowledge holder is explained in detail whether that information should be shared or not. And what would be the benefits of sharing the knowledge? What would be the disadvantages of sharing the knowledge? And there are several examples. As I mentioned, the National Biodiversity Authority also, which collects the PBRs and the bioresources, they have actually enacted the access benefit sharing. There are quite a few cases, which includes even the seaweed by the PepsiCo. And, an amount of almost 39 lakhs was paid as royalty, which went back to the Biodiversity Management Councils and as well as the local population. Similarly, is the neem lease used by the British India Biologicals. Almost close to about 55,000 has been given, and out of this, 20,000 was transferred to the BMC for planting. So it also talks about, not only the conservation of the bioresources, it talks about even the sustainable use of such resources. And the honeybee network under Srishti has also, developed a formula under which the access benefit sharing can happen. Here the innovator gets 30% of the benefits, okay? And of course, in addition, what is very important is that 5% goes to the nature, okay, to protect the ecology, and 5% to the community. There's 20% that goes to the innovation fund. And I mentioned something called the prior art. And here, as part of TKDL, I'd like to mention, we are a prior art database of traditional knowledge. And this has been particularly created by the Government of India under the CSIR and Ministry of Ayush, so that our traditional knowledge is not misappropriated. Currently, we are documenting transcribing from codified text. Codified text is basically information that has already been put as part of books and all, and or any published information. And these are the texts of the Ayurveda, Siddha, Unani, Yoga, Soba, Rigpa. Close to about 3.9 lakh formulations we have documented so far. But of course, this access of TKDL is given only to the patent officers and not to everybody. This is under the approval of the Government of India. So, in all of it, I would like to end my talk by saying grassroots matter. It is very important that we protect the rights of the people. And here, while documenting, while accessing, and while benefit sharing, we need to ensure that the livelihoods of the grassroots innovators are maintained. We need to ensure that we acknowledge and recognize the contributions of the grassroots innovators, and as well as protect their rights through proper IPR protection. And the benefit sharing in terms of the commercial gains need to flow back to these grassroots so that the sustainability happens. Thank you very much. I'm open to questions.
Hello, ma'am.
Yes, please.
Yes, ma'am. My question is during the documentation of any traditional knowledge.
Yeah.
So, what are the main concerns we will focus, or what are the main factors we will keep in mind during the documentation of any traditional knowledge?
See, as I mentioned, prior informed consent is extremely important. Okay, prior informed consent is first you talk to the knowledge holders and tell them what are the pros and cons of sharing such knowledge. Okay, first you identify yourself. You tell why you explain your purpose for documenting that knowledge. Okay, and if in case the party is interested without any force, then you go about identifying what knowledge they have. So then you mentioned that that you then ask them whether they are willing to share the knowledge with other people or not. If they say yes, you would also have to seek their permission to what extent they want us to share that knowledge. Whether it is in full or they want to be a small summary of that to be informed to others. Okay, and then you then talk about the benefit sharing also. You need to talk about what would happen if in case that knowledge is given to a third party for like commercialization, and then if in case there are any monetary benefits that one has gained out of it, how do you flow it back to the community? There are cases of the honeybee network where the benefit is given in not in the form of monetary inputs, but it is more like building a school for the community there, maybe such things can also, building a library for the school children in that particular village. There are many ways by which the benefits can be ensured to the local communities.
Ma'am, one more question.
Yes.
Suppose if you will go to Indian villages, some villages are there and they have some traditional knowledge, but that may be informal or only in words or oral. So can we take this type of traditional knowledge ahead?
Yes, you can take that. See, typically what happens is that, uh, when, if it is unique, it is unique. Okay. As a, a student, you would come back, first thing is you would identify what the plant is. If you do a general literature search, okay, you would be able to identify whether in any modern literature, whether that plant has been known for that said property. Okay. That is one way of identifying whether or validating the knowledge of the tribal holder. Okay, if that is not there, if in case you are able to access a Ayush practitioner, he or she would also be able to tell whether this particular plant is known to have such properties or not. So that is the second thing that you do. The third one is that, despite doing all that, you see that it is still unique. It is worth documenting the knowledge, because at this point of time, you do not, you give a benefit of doubt to the knowledge holder. Okay, he or she is speaking out of practice. Okay? He or she is speaking out of experience. So you take that experience forward. You can build a herbarium. If in case you're going to a local healer, you can ask which plant. They may even show what the plant is. Okay, and you build a herbarium around it. Okay, and then come back. Okay, and with a proper research proposal, you can actually go about validating it. So what I had mentioned in terms of prior informed consent, access benefit sharing, then applies, because you are doing further improvisation of that particular or validation of that particular knowledge. So the knowledge holder should definitely know that you are doing all this. Okay, and if you are finding any positive results, or sometimes you may not find anything, even then it is your moral obligation to go and inform the knowledge holder that you have done so and so experimentation, or you have got this experimentation done by somebody else, and these are the results of that experimentation. So be it positive or negative, you have to inform them. If it is positive, you can also go forward in seeing if in case you can find a commercial partner for such knowledge. And if in case that is the case, again, you tie up with the knowledge holder so that the benefits flow back to the knowledge holder.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Hello, ma'am.
Yes, please.
Ma'am, my question is, can a patent holder share its rights with the third party to practice its innovation in the foreign countries or not?
Say that again, please.
Ma'am, my question is, can a patent holder share its rights with the third party to perform its invention or practices invention in the foreign countries or not?
Yes. So a patent, as I have mentioned, you can sell a patent, you can mortgage a patent, you can license a patent. So in this case, it all depends on your interest. Say you are, you have a patent has been granted in your name. Okay. You want to exercise this in the US. Okay. You can find a third party who will be able to, help you in commercializing your invention in the US. So you are licensing this to that particular third party. Or if in case you want, you can even sell your patent to the third party. But for that, you need to have a valid patent in the US as well. Just by having a patent in India, you will not be able to exercise that option.
Thank you, ma'am.
Hello, ma'am. I'm
Yes.
Anjali Pandya this side. I have this question that if a researcher or an inventor has, research upon something, so he should first go for publication or go for the patent.
See, once if you go for publication, then what happens is you have created a prior art for your own application. Okay, so that is not the way. Okay, always the patent takes priority over the publication until the time that, because see, IPRs are all legal provisions. Okay, it provides the protection of your knowledge. Okay, whereas a
Oh,
research publication is more of a prior art information. So that is, trying to your publication provides for defensive protection, whereas your IPR provides for positive protection if you have
okay.
to exercise the rights.
Right, ma'am. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any further questions?
So students, if you have any question, you can drop down. I would like to thank you, madam, for your wonderful session on the IPR and patent. In earlier session also, Madhusudan Rao has also emphasized the importance of IPR and patent and the protection of the idea to the student. So it was wonderful session, ma'am. And we look forward for your support to this program in future basis.
Thank you so much, Megha.
Thank you so much for your time, ma'am.
Thank you. I hope I did not exceed the time. It is already 1:40.
No problem, ma'am. We have lunch break now. Yeah.
All right. Have a great lunch and good luck, guys. Best
Thank
wishes
you.
for your training here, and I'm sure you would have a wonderful time. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Megha.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am. Okay, students. So we have lunch break, and we'll meet at 2:15. Sorry. Yes, 2:15 because we have session at 2:30 by Dr. Tanuja ma'am. So don't delay it. Join by 2:15 so we can start as early as possible.
Okay, ma'am.
Okay, so take your lunch time.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you.